Remember back in the early pandemic days when we all thought like sweatpants and endless Zoom calls, that was the future of work?
Yeah.
Turns out, yeah, it's a little more complicated than that.
It is. It is.
You know, you've all sent us some really fascinating research, firsthand accounts, and even management advice. And we've got reports from McKinsey. We've got insights from state government leaders.
Yeah.
So let's take a deep dive today and figure out what the data actually says about remote work's impact on things like productivity, company culture, and the future of, you know, how we all work.
Yeah, I think the sheer scale of this change is just amazing to think about, you know?
Yes.
I mean, the idea that millions of people would be working from home regularly was almost unthinkable just a few years ago. And now McKinsey estimates that 20 to 25% of workers in advanced economies could be doing just that. 3 to 5 days a week remotely. That's 4 to 5 times
amazing.
More than pre-pandemic levels.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It is.
And it's not just hypothetical, is it? We're really seeing this play out.
Oh, absolutely.
In the real world.
A survey of chief administrative officers, CAOs in U.S. state governments, found that 66% are planning to reduce their real estate footprint as remote work becomes more common.
So it seems like it's here to stay in some form.
In some form.
But the big question is it actually working?
Right.
We hear CEOs complaining about productivity losses.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Is it really that simple?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think, you know, the McKinsey research suggests it's more nuanced than just assuming remote work automatically equals less productivity.
Okay.
So while full-time remote workers might see a slight dip of around 10 to 20%, you know, you have to remember those numbers come from peak pandemic chaos.
Of course.
When everyone...
Like the wild west of remote work. We were all figuring it out.
Not
exactly.
Not a fair comparison.
The haven for productivity.
Right, exactly. And it makes you wonder, right? Like, what types of work are genuinely well-suited for remote versus in-office? And I think that's something we should really consider moving forward.
Totally.
But, you know, when you look at hybrid workers, those splitting their time between home and the office, the picture changes. Again.
Tell me more about this hybrid model. What's the picture there?
Sure.
With productivity.
Yeah, well, for hybrid workers, the research shows either no impact on productivity.
Interesting.
Or even a boost. In some cases. So I think that's a pretty interesting finding.
It is interesting. It is interesting.
Right. It suggests that, you know, maybe flexibility and finding the right balance for different work styles might be key.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. What about company culture? This is a big one, right? This is a big topic that comes up. Whenever we talk about remote work. Does working remotely actually kill company culture?
Yeah, it's a common concern.
Right.
But what's fascinating is that a lot of employees actually feel it improves company culture.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, it seems like a lot of it comes down to increased flexibility. A study by Slack's Future Forum, highlighted in a Forbes report, found that workers often report a stronger connection to their workplace when given more autonomy over where and when they work.
That makes sense. So it's less about being physically present in the office. And more about feeling empowered and trusted to manage your own work.
Exactly. Yeah.
That makes sense to me. But what about mentorship? That's something the Forbes video brought up as a potential downside of remote work. Especially for younger employees. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a valid concern. The video raises a point that, you know, younger workers might miss out on those spontaneous in-person mentorship opportunities that just happen organically in an office environment.
You know, like quick chats by the water cooler or bumping into a senior colleague in the hallway. Yeah, those can be really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Early in your career.
Yeah.
Did they mention, did the sources mention any research?
Oh, yeah.
Kind of back that up.
One study that was mentioned found that engineers, for example, tended to get more feedback
Okay.
when they were physically present in the office.
So it sounds like intentional planning is key for mentorship.
Yeah.
Regardless
Regardless.
of the work setup.
You got it.
But let's be realistic.
Right.
We've seen potential benefits in terms of flexibility, culture, even productivity.
Right.
But remote work isn't a utopia.
It's not a utopia.
What are some of the challenges that the source has highlighted?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. No work arrangement is perfect.
Right.
So let's dive into some of these downsides.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you?
Well, I think both the McKinsey and Forbes articles really emphasized careful planning is crucial.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to things like training new employees, fostering effective communication, and maintaining those all-important social connections among remote team members.
It's easy to take for granted those, casual interactions when you're in an office.
Totally.
Water cooler chats.
Yeah.
The brainstorming sessions that happen organically. How do you replicate that remotely?
Well, one manager who was quoted in the Harvard Business Review article had some great advice on this.
Okay.
They recommended structured daily check-ins with their remote team.
Okay.
And offering a variety of communication tools.
So moving beyond endless email chains.
Exactly.
And reply alls.
Yeah. They found that richer communication methods, like video conferencing and instant messaging, can really help bridge the gap and make those remote interactions much more effective.
So it's about being more intentional with communication when you're not physically together.
You got it.
What other challenges did the sources highlight?
Well, there's a lot of talk about, the potential for social isolation and loneliness, which are real concerns,
Right. And it's easy to feel disconnected when you're not physically surrounded by colleagues. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes working from home can feel like, you're stranded on a deserted island.
Right.
So it's important.
Yeah.
To acknowledge that.
It is. It is. And it's crucial, for managers to be proactive in creating opportunities for social interaction.
Yeah.
So whether it's virtual coffee breaks or online team building activities or even just setting aside time at the start of meetings for some casual conversation.
Yeah.
Those little things can make a big difference.
I love that idea. It's about finding ways to build camaraderie.
Yeah.
Even when you're not in the same space. One thing that's been on my mind, speaking of challenges, is the potential impact of remote work on inequality.
Yeah.
This feels like kind of an elephant in the room that the sources didn't really address.
Right.
What I'm wondering is if we see this trend
where high-paying knowledge-based jobs go remote, while lower-paying service jobs stay in person, could that widen the gap between workers?
That's a valid concern. It's not hard to imagine a scenario where, remote work exacerbates those existing inequalities.
Right, because if you're in a job that requires you to be physically present, you don't have that option of working from home. And those are often the jobs that offer lower pay and fewer benefits.
Exactly.
So it feels like there's a real risk of creating kind of a two-tiered workforce with those who can work remotely, having more opportunities, and those who can't, being left behind.
It's a crucial issue to consider. We've talked a lot about, how companies and managers are adapting to remote work, but what about the workers themselves?
Yes.
How do we make sure that that everyone benefits from these changes?
Right.
Not just a select few.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's not enough to just embrace this new way of working. Without thinking about the potential consequences.
Right.
How do we create a future of work that's equitable and inclusive for everybody?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think it's one that policymakers, business leaders, and society as a whole need to address. Maybe it involves investing in training and upskilling programs for workers in those jobs that can't be done remotely, or finding ways to make remote work more accessible to people who don't have the ideal home office setup or reliable internet.
Right. Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
There's so much to unpack here.
There is.
It's clear that this conversation about the future of work and remote work's place in it is far from over.
It's evolving. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
The Harvard Business Review article that we looked at goes a little deeper into the psychological and emotional side of managing remote teams.
Okay.
And one thing that really stood out to me was their emphasis on the importance of emotional intelligence for remote managers.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't rely on those in-person cues.
Right.
And body language when you're communicating virtually.
The article highlighted how crucial it is for remote managers to be tuned in to their team's well-being.
Right.
You know, to be able to provide support and encouragement from afar. You know, it's almost like they need a superpower of empathy.
I love that analogy. So how do they cultivate that empathy superpower when they're not seeing their team face-to-face every day?
Right.
What did the article say?
Well, they stressed
the importance of establishing really clear communication norms and expectations for the team.
So kind of like rules of engagement for...
Exactly. It's important
for how the team interacts remotely.
Everyone to be on the same page about, you know, how and when to communicate, especially when you're dealing with different time zones and schedules.
Right. No more late night emails.
Exactly.
That send everybody into a panic.
Exactly.
Did they have any suggestions for combating that sense of isolation that we talked about earlier?
They emphasized creating opportunities for remote social interaction. Even suggesting things like virtual pizza parties. Online games. You know, it might sound silly, but, you know, those informal connections can make a huge difference in fostering team cohesion.
I think that's brilliant. It's about finding ways to have fun and connect as human beings, even when you're working remotely.
Right.
Okay. So we've covered so much ground today.
We have.
From, you know, the potential scale of remote work. And its impact on productivity.
Right.
To the cultural shifts it's creating and the challenges of mentorship and communication in a remote setting.
We've explored a lot, from the McKinsey research to the Forbes reporting and those insights from the Harvard Business Review. We've really gotten a 360-degree view of this complex and evolving topic.
It's fascinating to see how the future of work is being reshaped.
It is.
Right before our eyes. And remote work is playing such a key role in that transformation.
Absolutely.
But as with any major societal shift, there are going to be both challenges and opportunities to navigate.
Absolutely. The key is to, you know, approach these changes with open mind, a willingness to adapt, and a commitment to creating a future of work that truly benefits everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into the future of remote work, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question. Something to ponder. As you consider how these trends might impact your own work and life.
Sure.
You know, we've talked about all these different aspects of remote work, the productivity question, the impact on company culture, the challenges of mentorship and communication. But there's like a bigger picture here, right? It's not just about individual companies figuring out their policies. It's about how this whole shift to remote work is going to reshape our communities and even our society as a whole. If people aren't tied to a specific office location anymore, will we see people leaving big cities in droves? Could rural areas see a resurgence as people, you know, choose to live in more affordable or scenic locations? And how will that impact things like, you know, housing, transportation, even like the social fabric of our communities?
It's both exciting and a little bit daunting to think about the possibilities, isn't it? I mean, the McKinsey report actually touched on this. Estimating that if remote work takes hold, the way they're predicting, we could see like 3 to 4 times as many people working from home compared to before the pandemic.
That is massive. Imagine like city centers becoming less about office buildings and more about like residential spaces, parks, community centers, and cultural hubs.
Yeah.
What would our cities look like?
Right, exactly.
And what about the daily commute?
Right.
Imagine if that just became a thing of the past for millions of people.
It really underscores the need for thoughtful planning and collaboration.
Yeah.
You know, policymakers, businesses, and communities will need to work together to navigate these uncharted waters and create a future that works for everyone.
You're right. We can't just let these changes happen kind of haphazardly.
Right.
We have to be proactive in shaping a future of work that's sustainable, equitable, and benefits everyone.
Absolutely.
And this brings us back to that issue of inequality.
Yes.
That we were discussing earlier.
Absolutely. As exciting as the potential of remote work is, we need to be very mindful of those who might get left behind in this transition.
Right.
We can't allow a situation where some people are thriving in their home offices while others are struggling in jobs.
Yeah.
That can't be done remotely and have fewer opportunities for advancement.
Exactly. So the question becomes, how do we ensure that the future of work is one where everyone has the chance to thrive?
Right.
Regardless of their job or location.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's a complex challenge.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
But I think it starts with having these conversations, raising awareness about the potential pitfalls, and exploring potential solutions.
Yep.
You know, it might involve things like investing in training and upskilling programs for workers in those essential but less remote-friendly jobs.
I think that's a great starting point. What other solutions could we explore?
Well, we also need to think about ways to make remote work more accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
Not just those who have, like, the luxury of a dedicated home office and a stable internet connection.
You're so right. There's like a digital divide that we need to bridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we want remote work to be a truly equitable option.
Right.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked about the what, the why, and the how of remote work.
Right.
But there's one crucial question we haven't fully addressed.
Okay.
The who.
The who.
Yeah. Who gets to decide what the future of work looks like?
Right.
Is it CEOs making top-down decisions?
Yeah.
Is it policymakers setting regulations?
Yeah.
Is it individual workers advocating for their needs?
Right.
Or is it some combination of all of these forces working together?
That's such a powerful question.
Yeah.
And it's one that I think we all need to be asking ourselves as we navigate this changing landscape.
Right.
The future of work isn't something that will just be handed down to us.
Right.
It's something we all have a role in shaping.
Exactly. So as you go about your day, think about what kind of future of work you want to see. What kind of world do you want to work in? And what can you do to help make that vision a reality?
Beautifully said. That's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.